On the morning she was turned away, the bells of St. Mildred's rang with their usual calm insistence, as if the village itself refused to acknowledge the quiet undoing of a young woman's life. Carriages rolled across the frost-dusted square, silk skirts brushed polished pews, and whispers passed as naturally as breath. She felt them before she heard them, those murmurs that clung to her name like smoke, curling and darkening with each retelling. By the time she knelt in prayer, she understood that something once gently held had been released to fall. Her family did not raise their voices. They did not need to. Respectable people rarely did. Her mother's expression was fixed in that practiced manner of concern that concealed disappointment, while her father spoke of necessity and propriety, of how a household must protect its standing as one might protect a roof from rot. The words were measured, civil, and final. There would be no room for her beneath it. The rumor, thin and cruel, had done its work. A woman without dowry or defense was a risk they could not afford. She departed with one small trunk and a composure that surprised even herself. Pride, when bruised often enough, learns to walk without limping. As she crossed the threshold, she did not look back, though she felt the weight of generations pressing her onward, urging silence. Outside, winter light lay pale upon the road, and the house behind her seemed already to forget her shape. She walked until the chill reached her bones, until the village narrowed into a ribbon of hedges and damp stone walls. In the days that followed, her name traveled faster than she did. It appeared in letters, in pauses between teacups, in sympathetic glances that offered no shelter. She learned how swiftly kindness could be rationed, how even charity demanded discretion. At night, in borrowed rooms that smelled of coal smoke and starch, she lay awake rehearsing the life she had been trained for, now useless. Marriage had been her protection, and without it she was an unanswered question. In those uncertain days, memory became both refuge and torment. She recalled summers when her laughter had been unguarded, when doors opened easily and her presence required no explanation. She remembered believing that goodness would be recognized without announcement, that virtue was a currency universally accepted. Each recollection sharpened the present, for now she measured every gesture, every borrowed kindness, fearing the moment it might be withdrawn. Yet beneath the ache stirred a stubborn clarity. She would not beg. She would not perform contrition for a sin she had not committed. If she must move forward diminished, she would do so upright, carrying what remained of herself intact, even if the world insisted she was less. That resolve, quiet and unadorned, became her companion, steadying her steps and schooling her face into serenity whenever doubt pressed too closely, whenever the future appeared not cruel, but simply indifferent to her hopes and untested courage. The proposal arrived not with romance, but relief. It came by way of a distant cousin, written in careful hand, offering a solution framed as duty. A duke required a wife. He was reclusive, the letter explained, and much altered by a riding accident that had rendered him unfit for society's pleasures. His estate was well managed, his needs modest. The arrangement would restore her respectability, if not her former comfort. She read the letter twice, then folded it with hands that trembled only once. She had heard of him, as everyone had, the disabled duke, spoken of with lowered voices and a touch of disappointment, as though he were a promising play that had closed too soon. He no longer attended assemblies. His absence had become a feature, discussed and dismissed in equal measure. That such a man should choose her felt less like fortune than coincidence. Two castaways tethered by circumstance. When they first met, it was beneath a ceiling too high for warmth, in a hall that echoed with restraint. He did not stare, nor did he avert his gaze. He inclined his head with precision, his expression composed to the point of severity. She noticed his stillness, the careful way he positioned himself, and assumed the rumors true. What she did not notice was how his eyes softened, briefly, as if recognizing a scene long imagined. Their conversation was courteous, sparse, and shaped by expectation. He spoke of responsibilities, of the order of days, of how he wished his household to be conducted. She answered with equal formality, offering compliance rather than opinion. Between them lay an understanding unspoken. This was not a meeting of hearts, but of needs. Yet beneath his measured tone ran something steadier, an attention that did not waver even when silence fell. The marriage was settled with efficiency. There were no crowds, no lingering congratulations. She wore a gown altered from better days, and he stood beside her with the gravity of a man accepting a vow he had long rehearsed alone. When she spoke her promise, her voice did not falter. She had learned the value of resolve. He answered with a calm that suggested certainty rather than resignation. As they departed together, the world shifted almost imperceptibly. The road ahead was unknown, but no longer empty. She sat opposite him in the carriage, aware of the space between them, of the rules that governed it. Outside, the countryside slid past in winter hues, hedgerows bare, fields waiting. She told herself that survival was enough, that dignity could be rebuilt stone by stone. What she did not know, as the horses carried them onward, was that this union had not begun in desperation, but in devotion. Long before rumor had stripped her of shelter, long before necessity had bent her path, she had been seen. And in the quiet interval between her exile and her becoming, a man who had watched her from a distance finally brought her home. The estate revealed itself gradually, as if unwilling to be known at once. Iron gates opened onto a drive lined with winter-bare trees, whose branches arched overhead like a vaulted nave. The house emerged through mist, gray stone warmed only by the glow of windows already lit against the afternoon gloom. She felt the weight of it before she crossed the threshold. Generations of order, silence polished smooth by time. This would be her world now, and she stepped into it with measured calm, determined not to appear either grateful or afraid. Inside, everything spoke of restraint. The servants moved with quiet efficiency, eyes lowered yet attentive. Fires burned low and steady, as though even warmth must be moderated. The Duke guided her through the rooms without commentary, pausing only to indicate their purpose. His gait was careful, his movements deliberate, confirming what rumor had promised. She matched his pace instinctively, adjusting without remark. It seemed the first unspoken agreement of their marriage, that consideration would replace intimacy. Their days settled quickly into a pattern. Mornings were taken separately, afternoons governed by estate matters, evenings marked by a shared meal eaten with polite conversation and long pauses. She learned his preferences through observation rather than inquiry. How he favored the light nearer dusk, how he listened more than he spoke, how his attention sharpened when she mentioned village concerns. He, in turn, watched her with a steadiness she could not quite interpret, as though measuring something already known. Small kindnesses began to surface, so understated they almost escaped notice. A book she had once mentioned, impossible to find in the village, appeared upon her writing desk, its spine newly mended. The gardener planted a border of flowers she had admired in passing, their promise of spring bright against the dull season. Instructions were given to the staff, without her presence, ensuring her comfort while preserving her pride. She thanked him each time with composed gratitude, unaware that these gestures were not accommodations, but offerings long prepared. The house itself responded to her, rooms subtly altered by her habits. Curtains were drawn earlier, fires stoked higher. The stillness that had once defined the place softened, though no laughter echoed yet. She sensed it and wondered at her influence, cautious not to overestimate it. Marriage had taught her that safety could be mistaken for affection, and she guarded herself accordingly. News from the outside world intruded soon enough. A dinner was proposed by neighboring relations, an event small enough to seem harmless. She agreed, knowing withdrawal would invite speculation. The table was set with impeccable formality, the guests polite, to the point of strain. Questions hovered just shy of impropriety. Glances lingered too long. She recognized the familiar balance of courtesy and judgment and held herself immaculately, answering nothing that was not asked. It was then she noticed a shift, when a comment, lightly delivered, suggested curiosity about her circumstances. The Duke's response was immediate. He did not raise his voice, nor did he sharpen it. He spoke as one accustomed to obedience, affirming his wife's position with such calm certainty that the question dissolved. The room adjusted around him, conversation redirected, the challenge answered without spectacle. She felt something loosen within her chest, a tension she had not realized she carried. Afterward, in the quiet of the carriage, she thanked him, expecting acknowledgment. Instead, he regarded her with a seriousness that held. "You need not endure what I will not permit," he said simply. The words settled between them, not as comfort, but as promise. She nodded, uncertain how to respond to a protection so quietly claimed. As weeks passed, her awareness sharpened. He seemed to anticipate her needs with uncanny precision. When she fell ill, a physician arrived before she requested one. When she hesitated over correspondence, advice appeared without inquiry. It was as though he read the spaces between her thoughts, responding to questions she had not yet spoken. At night, she lay awake, wondering how familiarity could grow so swiftly in the absence of confession. Fragments of understanding surfaced through chance remarks. A reference to a charity event she barely remembered, described with exactness. A comment on a habit she had long since abandoned. Each instance unsettled her, suggesting a knowledge that predated their union. She dismissed the unease, attributing it to her own heightened sensitivity. But the pattern persisted. One afternoon, walking the long gallery alone, she encountered a portrait half hidden by shadow. It depicted a younger version of her husband, unguarded, his expression softened by something like hope. She studied it, struck by the contrast, and wondered what had been lost between then and now. A footstep sounded behind her, and she turned, startled. He apologized, retreating at once, but not before she caught a flicker of emotion crossing his face, quickly mastered. That evening, silence pressed closer than usual. She felt the weight of unasked questions, of truths circling just beyond reach. When she finally spoke, it was not accusation but curiosity. "You seem to know me," she said quietly. He met her gaze, and for a moment the careful distance faltered. "I have had reason," he replied, voice steady, though something beneath it strained. He said no more. The fire crackled, shadows shifting across the walls, and she sensed that a boundary had been approached, not yet crossed. As she retired for the night, her thoughts restless, she understood that her marriage, begun in necessity, was anchored in a history she had never seen. And somewhere within the restraint she mistook for indifference, a truth waited, patient and alive, preparing to be spoken. Night gathered early, pressing rain against the windows until the house seemed to breathe with it. She stood by the hearth, hands folded, watching firelight steady her thoughts. Across the room the Duke sat motionless, his cane set aside, eyes fixed on the flames. Silence, once a shelter, had grown weighted with words withheld. She felt the moment arriving, inevitable as tide, and chose not to retreat. When she spoke his name, it carried neither reproach nor fear, only resolve. He answered at once, rising with care yet without the stiffness she had learned to expect. The truth stood between them, unmistakable now, asking to be claimed. He did not reach for her, but his voice bridged the space with quiet gravity. He told her of years measured in watching, of noticing kindness where others saw nothing remarkable. He spoke of church aisles and village lanes, of her patience offered freely, never seeking applause. He confessed that when injury narrowed his world, her steadiness widened it again. The cane, he said, was once necessity, now habit, and finally refuge. He had allowed rumor to persist, not to deceive her, but to guard the small life he rebuilt. She listened without interruption, breath shallow, heart reordering its past. Memories shifted, aligning themselves with this new light. What she had mistaken for distance was devotion disciplined by fear. When she answered, it was to name the wound he could not see. She told him of exile carried politely, of learning to be small to survive. She admitted the terror of believing herself chosen only because she was convenient. His reply came firm and plain, a refusal of that mercy. He said he chose her because constancy had a sound, and he knew hers. He stepped closer, careful still, yet unafraid. She placed her hand upon his arm, feeling strength she had never doubted but finally understood. The house seemed to settle around them, walls listening, fire brightening. Morning brought its own trial, for the world would require an answer. Visitors arrived unannounced, curiosity thinly veiled as concern. She felt the old tightening, the instinct to withdraw. Before she could speak, the Duke addressed them, posture easy, voice assured. He named her his partner, his equal, the heart of his house. No explanation followed, none permitted. The room adjusted, judgment dissolving into acceptance. Later, alone again, she laughed softly, a sound long unused. He joined her, relief plain, joy restrained but real. They spoke then of the future, not in grand designs, but shared mornings. Affection settled into something durable, built of trust. Yet even as contentment took shape, a final truth waited. He led her to the long gallery and paused before the shadowed portrait. He told her that hope had once lived there and now lived here. She understood the courage it cost him to say so. As dawn edged the windows, she realized love had not rescued her from shame. It had taught her to stand within it, unbroken. Hand in hand, they faced the day, certain at last. Beyond the gates, the world waited, curious and watchful. She smiled, knowing she was no longer unseen. He squeezed her fingers, a private vow spoken without sound, and together they stepped forward, carrying past wounds gently, prepared to meet whispers with patience and answer them with truth, unaware that one final test still waited beyond the morning light.